Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News, a bi-weekly analytical geopolitical news show. I've got some allergies going on, so the audio might get kind of spicy here going forward. We'll see. This week, because of the U.S. holiday, Thanksgiving, which totally whitewashes G-side, settler colonialism, etc. Not much has changed, right? See Israel's Independence Day falling a day before Nakba Day on May 15th. So when it comes to Western imperialism, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Or actually, if we're honest, getting slightly worse than what the status quo has been for the past couple decades. So anyways, today we're going to be discussing ceasefires. Will they actually happen? There are three geopolitical flashpoints that could lead to a great power confrontation between the collective West and countries associated with the burgeoning multipolar world: Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan. The incoming Trump administration markets itself as a peacemaking entity, but is this actually true? Is peace, given the exigencies of great power politics, even attainable? So join us tonight to examine these conflicts in the context of an incoming Trump administration. But first, the machine must be served. Patreon plug. Mint Press News is a small independent newsroom, demonetized on just about every platform with no corporate sponsors. So it's a grassroots enterprise. Anything you can do to help if you appreciate this kind of watchdog journalism. Now, I meant to say wash dog, not wash tog. But I guess that could also work as words continue to have less and institutions continue to have less and less meaning as we go into the year 2025. And if you're being nickeled and dimed by late stage finance capitalism, that's cool. We're just glad you're here. Like, share, subscribe if you want to. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. So as everybody's still filtering in to the live, greetings, everybody. Let's just remember the cornerstone, the foundation, the ballast of U.S. foreign policy before we get into the main segments. The thing I love about Lindsey Graham, there's nothing I could ever love about Senator Lindsey Graham, but if there's one thing I do like about his personality, it's that unlike any other politician in the United States, he literally says the quiet part out loud more than anybody. Check this out. This is from yesterday. We're getting this clipping from Breakthrough News, who we work with sometimes.
It's about money. People don't talk much about it. But you know the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. It's the breadbasket of really the developing world. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes out of Ukraine. We can make money and have an economic relationship with Ukraine that'd be very beneficial to us with peace. So Donald Trump's going to do a deal to get our money back.
Because He loves deals. All right, we all love deals. He wrote The Art of the Deal, or rather, he had someone ghostwrite The Art of the Deal for him. So we're about deals.
To enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals, a good deal for Ukraine and us, and he's going to bring peace. And Biden's been a disaster when it comes to containing bad guys.
When it comes to, this is an important word, and Biden's been a disaster.
When it comes to containing bad guys.
Exactly, containing bad guys. The entire theme of this episode will be containment in U.S. foreign policy, containing and isolating Russia, containing and isolating Iran, containing and isolating China. That's what we try to do with sanctions. That's why we build military bases everywhere. And containment. Containment, it is a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy since the Cold War. And it hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed, and we'll talk about this in this episode, the only thing that really has changed is the ability for the United States to overthrow governments and do coups and starve out countries like we could in the 90s, 80s, 90s. Yeah. So first of all, let's get into it. If we can get some, I'm going to talk to you for 5 minutes to set the stage. We've got some Ukraine B-roll. That would be amazing. So there are 3 geopolitical flashpoints that could lead to a great power confrontation between the collective West and countries associated with the burgeoning multipolar world, as I mentioned before. Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan. The incoming Trump administration kind of markets itself as a peacemaking entity, but is this actually true? Is peace, given the exigencies of great power politics, even attainable? On the Ukrainian front, the past week has seen the most significant escalation in hostilities since the high-intensity phase of the war began nearly 3 years ago. It is a new chapter of uncertainty and fear. It began with President Joe Biden countermanding a long-standing NATO policy disallowing Ukraine to shoot long-range missiles into Russian territory for fears of nuclear escalation. In short, that is precisely what happened. Last Thursday, the 21st of November, Moscow unleashed a new intermediate-range ballistic missile at a munitions factory inside Ukraine. And President Putin has also, declared that Russia has altered its nuclear doctrine to include a change that allows for Moscow to launch a nuclear strike if attacked by a non-nuclear country, such as Ukraine, that is supported by a nuclear state, such as the US, UK, France, for instance. Well, this is a distressing development. Western think tanks have been quick to downplay the gravity of the Kremlin's new posture of deterrence. With, for example, Carnegie Center for Russia-Eurasian Studies, which is a Western think tank, quote, taken as a whole, the updated doctrine significantly lowers the threshold for Russia's use of nuclear weapons. The problem is that the lower this threshold becomes, the harder it is to convince anyone that any such threshold actually exists. So they're basically saying Putin's bluffing, and the more he bluffs, the bigger the bluff is. While this is perhaps a blasé take in the face of a potential nuclear annihilation, we do not anticipate any serious Russia escalation, either up or down the ladder, until President-elect Trump takes office. Moving to the flashpoint in West Asia now, and of course we're going to start with Ukraine and then get into the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, and then end on China and Taiwan, because they're all connected, especially when it comes to the U.S. military industrial production base, and we just don't have enough munitions for all these wars. Anyways, moving to the flashpoint in West Asia with the ongoing genocide in Palestine, Trump has stated that he wants the war over by the time he takes office, but urges his Netanyahu to, quote, finish the job. To that end, it is clear that the Israeli administration is at least trying to cement a temporary ceasefire with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon as a gift to Trump, presumably so that it can have political leeway to continue the annexation and cleansing of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Also, there's a consideration that the Israeli Defense Force is in systemic collapse, which we'll get into a little bit. The overriding question then, given the situation in these two theaters, as well as Trump's belligerence towards China, is if the president-elect is actually the anti-war candidate that he campaigned on being. The inherent wild factor card of any Trump administration makes this difficult to determine based off his past presidency, which saw its share of violence and brinksmanship with Iran and Russia, because he armed Ukraine extensively, and his assortment of hawkish cabinet picks who vary in their belligerence depending on the conflict and the state actor that they are hawkish towards. Like, some people will be very pro-Israel and also very pro-Ukraine. And then others will be like, stop funding Ukraine, but also still be very pro-Israel. And, so it's a mixed mash of different political interventionalist ideologies. Again, he campaigns on being an anti-war candidate, but not really. So let's check out the most recent news. We're going from a Southeast Asian South Asian network, WION News, for this reporting, because we like to mix it up and get away from Western mainstream media.
Shifting our focus now, Ukraine is reportedly losing ground in Russia's Kursk.
Well, a senior Ukrainian official reveals that over 40% of the land that Ukraine seized in its incursion of the Kursk region back in August has now been lost. Ukraine has controlled over 1,300 square kilometers, which has dropped to around 800 now.
Now, the unexpected incursion in August by the Ukrainian forces had caught Moscow off guard, prompting Russia to deploy thousands of additional troops in the region.
And of course, we did an episode on this back in August. Obviously, they couldn't hold ground in Kursk, and they weren't going to capture that nuclear power plant that they were going for. So it also exposed some of Ukraine's strategic reserves to Russian guns and anti-tank fire and drones. So this is going about the exact way we said it was going to go. So anyways, and they've also continued to make gains in the Donbass region. So yeah, saw this coming. We did.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky had recently warned that Russia aims to push Ukrainian forces out of the area by January 2025.
Meanwhile, Ukraine is investigating debris.
Well, and the way it goes, that plan probably won't happen by January 2025, but it will happen eventually. It's inevitable. So the bargaining chip that Ukraine wanted to use in getting some of the Donbass back in the event of ever having ceasefire negotiations, which hopefully will happen sooner rather than later, but who knows, that's going to be gone.
From a Russian ballistic missile that hit the city of Dnipro on the 21st of November. Ukraine's security services further suggested that the missile was likely from Russia's Kedar missile complex. The missile, which had a speed of 13,000 kilometers per hour, struck a Ukrainian military facility.
Oh, yeah. Someone in the comments said, WION is the most anti-China channel on earth. Yes, India and China have a very complicated relationship. But again, we're gonna just put that aside because they're not reporting on China.
These missile fragments were found and seized by the investigators of the security service as a result of a missile strike that was carried out on the city of Dnipro on November 21st, 2024. It should be said that this is the first time that such remnants of a missile have been discovered on the territory of Ukraine. This object had not been documented by the investigators of the security services before.
Russian President Putin has confirmed the use of advanced intermediate-range hypersonic missiles. He further added that the attack was a warning to the West against further support to Ukraine in the ongoing war. Mike Waltz, who is Donald Trump's National Security Advisor nominee.
All right, so this is his nominee for National Security Advisor. Let's see. Well, first of all, if he'll get confirmed, but he can do some shenanigans with recess appointments. We're not going to get into United States machine politics in this, but even if this guy's super problematic, there is a chance that he can get this guy in. Also, yeah, let's just see what his national security advisor says.
Has said that the incoming Trump administration will bring the war to an end. And Trump has also previously stated that he would end the war within 24 hours.
That's really an absurd statement, but yeah.
the president-elect has been very concerned about the escalation and where it's all going. If North Korea has made this move, we have made a move. Russia has now responded. Iran is involved. South Korea is thinking about getting involved. Our allies have now, extended the range of their missiles as well. So we need to bring this to a responsible end. We need to restore deterrence, restore peace, and get ahead of this escalation ladder rather than responding to it.
So one of the biggest problems with that idea is, how do you restore deterrence without accomplishing any objectives? Because the deterrence is basically getting Russia to stop fighting and, reestablishing Ukraine as a military bulwark against perceived Russian incursion into Europe. So I don't see how that's possible, how you restore deterrence and find a path to peace that's going to be kind of like threading the needle. But Trump, and before we move to West Asia, Trump already faces the prospect of breaking one of his biggest campaign promises, having repeatedly pledged again and again to end the war before I even become president. Over the summer, he said, of course, as they just brought up, he'd do it in 24 hours. And then, of course, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov was like, no, that's not going to happen. Presumably by declaring a ceasefire on the current front lines and then striking some sort of deal in which Ukraine gives up some territory and future NATO membership, maybe, in return for peace. But, who knows if the Ukrainian government could be pressured like that, or how U.S. allies would feel, what would NATO's reaction be? Then Trump would try to get out of NATO. It's a mess. So there's no resolving it in 24 hours. But any such deal fundamentally requires the front lines in Ukraine to be somewhat stable. And they're not stable. Advances are being made here. Advances are being made there. So they need to be locked in before they can come to any territorial concessions. And apparently, reportedly, and this is according to Politico, a phone call 2 days after the election, President Putin, Trump warned President Putin not to escalate his 2.5-year-old invasion, as they want to call it. The Russian president has instead done the opposite. He's still massing forces in Ukraine's southeastern territories in apparent preparation for a new offensive. And over the past week, Putin has launched some of the biggest missile attacks on Ukraine in months. So I don't think Trump is the buddy and influences the buddy influence that, he thinks he has over the Russian president. Ukraine's also not in a strong bargaining position right now. And Ukraine, meanwhile, is running out of troops. We've seen this again and again. This week, President Joe Biden sought to give Kyiv more leverage before he leaves office. This is what he's trying to do. He's trying to, people say it's future-proofing the war, but it's more like giving Ukraine the tools in his mind, or whoever is controlling his mind, leverage in future negotiations by supplying them with long-range missiles, by also authorizing the Ukrainians to use landmines, which U.S. forces haven't done since Vietnam because they directly impact civilians. That, to be fair, Russians do it all the time. So, there's no moral equivalence there. But Ukraine promptly used them to attack Russia once they got the ATACMS, which responded by threatening, yet again, nuclear war. So Biden's move led Trump's incoming national security advisor, Michael Walls, which you just saw, to comment, this is another step up the escalation ladder, and nobody knows where this is going. It's my personal assertion, though, however, that this is going to remain somewhat static until Trump comes into office. I think Putin and the Russian government, after shooting the nuclear-capable missile at the weapons facility in Dnipro, sorry, my Slavic is non-existent, saw that as a good enough deterrence. They don't want to ramp it up anymore. And then, of course, the Western media and academic complex is playing it down, saying, this was just a bluff. And, the more Putin rattles his saber, the less he's going to do something. So, each side is saving face with their own media complex and their own people. So it's going to wait. Biden might try to push through another aid package, but yes, the war is going to not change. The escalation ladder, I don't think, will increase, and there won't be any big policy position of any of the parties, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or the United States, until Trump takes office. And guys, it's only, let me see, let me count the exact weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 weeks. So that's not a lot of time. A lot can happen in 6 weeks, but again, nobody wants a nuclear war. It seems like there are some people that are willing to do that kind of brinksmanship, but if I got asked a question the other day, it's like, well, what's going to happen? Should I pay my rent in December? Yeah, you should probably still pay your rent in December, probably January too. Okay. But actually, wait, how long does it take to get evicted? That's going to be up to your state laws. Okay. So you're going to have to do your own rent brinksmanship. Okay. I can't tell you, but yes, if you don't want your credit to get destroyed, I mean, credit's not going to really matter in the end times, in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. But if you don't want your credit to get destroyed, I would recommend paying rent December, because it's not, the entire system isn't crashing just yet. And one consideration I want to bring to the forefront right now is that when it comes to the war in Ukraine, the situation, the genocide in Palestine, and the ongoing war against Iran, one of the things that everybody knows that's making these policy decisions in Russia, in China, in Iran, in the burgeoning countries, as I said before, of the multipolar world, is that the United States is no longer able to power project in the way it is. Okay, there's a recruiting crisis. Foreign interventionism is not going to help that. If you saw our episode last week with Major General Dennis Leitch, who was a part of the U.S. Army Readiness Command, there's no way to solve the recruiting crisis. We're also low on ammunition. Our industrial base is completely stretched at its limit by supplying Israel, by supplying Ukraine, and by giving weapons and munitions to Taiwan in order to guard against a Chinese incursion from their perspective. So a lot of war games, and of course, we've mentioned before that this geostrategic shift from the Middle East, from Ukraine, is supposed to go to the Pacific next to contain, as we already heard Lindsey Graham say, China. Sorry about the allergies, to isolate China. And can that actually be done? Well, a lot of people are thinking about it. So recently, some war games were were done against a China versus Taiwan invasion, and what that would look like. And this was run by the Center for Strategic and International Studies that was founded in 1969. It's been around forever. They have an agenda, but they're not horrible. So here's the roll up of the China-Taiwan war game. It's connected to all of these things going on because we are the paymaster and the bomb master for all these different conflicts.
War with China would produce destruction on a scale unseen by the United States since 1945. China continues to strengthen its military and maintains the right to use force against Taiwan. U.S. officials warn that a Chinese invasion is a real possibility and imply that the U.S. would become involved in such a conflict. Although conflict is not inevitable, it is not impossible. CSIS conducted 24 wargame iterations of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The good news is that Chinese forces were unable to conquer the island, and Taiwan endured as an autonomous democracy. The challenges confronting a Chinese invasion are formidable. However, the costs were sobering. In 4 weeks of fighting, the United States typically lost hundreds of aircraft, 2 aircraft carriers, and up to 24 other ships. Bases on Guam were devastated. The Taiwanese economy suffered extensive damage. Japan was often dragged into the war and its bases attacked. China also took terrible losses, often including more than 100 warships and tens of thousands of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured.
It's important to note that in the report, they said like 3,000 to 6,000 U.S. military personnel would die. It'd probably be way more than that. I don't know why they're downplaying that. Okay. Anyways,
Such a failure might endanger the Chinese Communist Party's grip on power. The war might last until exhaustion, producing an unstable peace with recurring conflict.
so yes, that is a major theme of what's going on right now. This brings us back to the war in Ukraine. All of these powers, these great powers, the United States, Russia, China, they cannot afford to be seen to be defeated. So what we're looking at is a frozen conflict, I think, in Ukraine and on the Russian front, because Trump's not really going to end it. He's put forward a plan to kind of do a North-South Korea style demilitarized zone with potentially NATO troops or some sort of troops or potentially U.S. military contractors, who knows, on the border, create like a massive front of barbed wire and landmines. And that doesn't seem like a sustainable plan. So frozen conflict there. Any battle with China would end in a frozen conflict there because no one is in a position to defeat the other person. And yeah, so all of these pointless wars, but let's continue with the war game simulation.
Terrifying possibility of nuclear escalation also looms over any war involving two nuclear powers. The costs and risks for both sides strongly argue for avoiding war. Both will need to pursue political and diplomatic strategies that contribute to that end.
It's also important to know that, yes, China also obviously doesn't want war. Just for all the war hawks that do not follow this channel, I just had to say that.
The United States and its allies, military deterrence will be a crucial part of that equation. How can that be achieved? The United States should harden bases, work with allies, particularly Japan, for additional basing options, continue to make its forces more survivable, and buy more long-range missiles, particularly anti-ship missiles, because some inventories are critically low.
Okay. So this is what he doesn't say it explicitly, but some inventories are critically low. Yes, our ability to produce artillery shells, 2,000-pound bombs, all of these like standard munitions, because we don't have the industrial base to, again, supply Israel forever, deter Iran for ourselves, supply Ukraine forever, and a war in Taiwan. That's just not something that happened. And after the global war on terror, it shifted, our military basically shifted, our military industrial complex did a lot of shifting from an industrialized base to like niche, like research and development for theoretical deterrence, like special weapons and stuff that, never get used beyond theoretical stuff. So, but they make a lot of money. So, it's like this whole system of the military industrial complex and capitalism kind of destroys itself. But anyways,
the Taiwanese can adopt the porcupine strategy, deploy more mobile anti-ship missiles, build a fully manned and highly capable army, and spend less on expensive and vulnerable ships and aircraft.
Yeah. So the Taiwan, I guess one of the criticisms of the war report was the Taiwanese military is spending too much stuff on things that the Chinese military can blow up. So just dig in and trench along the island and get ready to like resist for America.
Deterrence is possible and affordable, but it will require planning, some resources, and political will. For the full CSIS report, visit csis.org.
Yep. So anyways, yes, that is how think tanks, that's why we call it the military industrial, some say congressional, media, academic, and intelligence complex. It all works together. It makes a lot of people very rich, and it tries to maintain American unipolarity across the globe. Again, it's not working. If you actually read the CIS report, it's just there's just not the industrial base. They said in it explicitly that the United States would run out of munitions within like 2 weeks of the war, and there's no way to replace it if it were to happen now. So yeah, a blockade won't work. You might need to invade. It's just insanity. It's completely unnecessary. But then again, they're not going to back down. No one's going to back down. So we are witnessing, I believe, like the most tenuous moment in global security. So there's actually this video that I was silly and forgot to prepare because I was busy focusing on Lindsey Graham. So it was pretty good. Okay, I don't know. Trust me. I'll try to find it later because it was quite excellent. So I guess now that we've touched on those two flashpoints, those are going to remain stable. Hopefully the Russia-Ukraine one will. China-Taiwan will definitely not devolve into a hot conflict, probably anytime soon, but definitely not before Trump gets elected. So what do we have to turn to? Well, we have to turn to this ceasefire deal, this supposed ceasefire deal that's currently happening right now, that could definitely ease tensions in West Asia. So again, we're going to listen to some adversarial media. This comes from ILTV, the state-sponsored Israeli English-speaking media station. So it's not meant for people living in Israel. It's meant for us, unless you only speak English and you live in Israel. This is from earlier today.
Israel has reportedly agreed in principle to the U.S.-Lebanon ceasefire proposal. The cabinet held consultations overnight to discuss details of the deal. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein returned to Washington after meetings in Beirut and Washington, reportedly bringing the sides very close to agreement. The cabinet discussions came after one of the most violent days of the war, as Israel was targeted with some 600 missiles, while the Air Force pounded Beirut throughout the day.
It's important to know that the strikes against Beirut have been particularly egregious because they're trying to apply diplomatic pressure by attacking the civilian population to get Hezbollah to concede. So we're going to talk about why Hezbollah might do that, but not quite yet.
Hochstein reportedly told Israeli officials that this was the last chance to make a deal until the Trump administration comes into office on January 20th. The ceasefire in Lebanon could be close at hand, but in the meantime, the IDF continues destroying Hezbollah targets on the ground and in the air. Lebanese media report.
Yeah, you see those Hezbollah targets, those tenement buildings.
New waves of air.
Someone in the comments section says that is by definition terrorism. Yeah, trying to apply pressure onto an associated military force by directly and collectively punishing civilians is terrorism. Just kidding. The United States controls the definition of terrorism.
Strikes after the IDF ordered evacuations of 12 buildings in Dakhia in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital. The Air Force hit 150 Hezbollah targets and advanced further into South Lebanon while killing dozens of Hezbollah terrorists.
Okay, yeah, of course, there's nothing to substantiate that. However, I do have word that after 2 months, they have apparently bombed the town of Khiyam in the south and like pretty much leveled it, and then they've taken it. So first little village they've taken in 2 months. That's what I'm getting. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry, guys.
12 separate Hezbollah command centers were targeted in Dakhia, the key Hezbollah stronghold in the Lebanese capital. Ahead of the strikes, warnings were sent to civilians ordering them to evacuate to avoid injury. Troops also advanced on the ground. The 36th Division located weapons, launchers, underground infrastructure, and military compounds that posted a threat to northern Israel. After about 12 hours of quiet, Hezbollah this morning renewed rocket fire into Israel. The Foreign Ministry says that it expects the body of murdered Chabad emissary Rabbi Tzvi Koch.
Okay, yeah, and then an extremist settler got murdered in UAE in Dubai. I don't know why he felt like he was super safe there. He's an international target. So, anyways, we're just gonna move on from that. So, is this thing feasible? Okay. Well, first of all, let's not even talk about the ceasefire yet. We're going to get into it, but Israel's threats of annexation, because I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why Israel's actually going to try and push for a ceasefire in Lebanon is because, first of all, their military is failing. And second, they want to gift it to Trump. But let's see what they have just published in this completely sympathetic to Israel publication. This is, stuff we've been saying for a while, but it's from WAPO. War fatigue deepens in Israel as deaths mount and fighting expands. So a lot of people are not reporting for duty. Once upon a so first of all, I thought it was really interesting that, well, first they're saying more than 800 soldiers have been killed since October 7th. That's a low number, first of all. And then they have subject matter experts saying what we've been saying forever. Wherever you look, the economic crisis, the toll on the reservists and their families, and of course the dead and wounded, Israeli society is definitely at the edge of its capacity. So one second. Where was this really interesting quote? So first of all, they're having to, get these ultra-Orthodox Jewish people into the military. That's roiled Israeli society in the recent weeks. And, they're not going to get trained up in time. The military is facing a huge shortage of troops and planning to extend mandatory service in the standing army and increase the maximum age for reservists. What do you mean increase the maximum age? There's 40-year-olds running around. They have entire battalions of 40-year-olds. Just kind of reminds me of Ukraine with their manpower shortage. So this was my favorite quote from this entire article. Quote, I feel like the government is making me ask my wife for a weekend with the boys in Vegas, but actually it's to go for weeks into Lebanon to defend the country. Said a reservist in the special forces who served for nearly 300 days over the past year. Kind of crazy that you're talking about like basically committing ethnic cleansing as a weekend with the boys in Vegas. So here's my favorite line. I've never heard of desertions from special forces units. They're usually rigorously selected. His 12-man unit is down to 5 after 7 refused to show up. We never imagined a war that would be going so deep and going for so long. Also, there is no one to replace us. So again, and here are some hard statistics that we've been talking about since last year. Israel's economic growth fell to 2% last year and is expected to shrink to 1.5% in 2024. Before the war, an average of 3,200 workers were absent from work each month for reserve duty, usually for only a part of the week, kind of like the American Army National Guard. But now, the average figure for people out of the workforce is 130,000. For a country as small as Israel, that's a lot. Small businesses are shuttering, startups are losing capital, and companies are relocating. I think there was a statistic that I saw earlier that 5 times the normal amount of Israelis are applying for work visas in Canada. This is why. So, okay, looking not great. So that's one of the main reasons why they need this to end. Plus, there's internal political pressure from the citizens of the North to get people back to their settlements. So they want to end the war, but here's the thing. Israel's threats of annexation, and if you got B-roll for the Israel side, that'd be awesome. Thanks, man. Israel's threats of annexation could prolong hostilities, right? When it comes to Israel's 2-front war in Gaza and Lebanon, they call it a 7-front war. It's not a 7-front war. Okay, calm down. So the president-elect, Donald Trump, has indicated to both Prime Minister Netanyahu and senior negotiators in Qatar that he supports Netanyahu's military plans, but wants to see him wrap things up, right? So and this is common wisdom amongst the analyst and commentator community, while Netanyahu is expected to be more willing to bend to Trump than he has been with Biden, obviously because Trump's going to be worse for Palestine. We've already talked about that. He took $100 million from Miriam Adelson, a rabid a Zionist mob boss who wants to completely claim all of the West Bank. So the Israeli leader is also in a stronger position politically, and he is in a stronger position politically than he has been in a minute, and more able to resist U.S. pressure. again, he has to show up and try in court in a couple days, but still pretty secure position. So what his people believe is, obviously he's kind of very unpopular amongst a huge block of people, but there's a perception that he has fought successful campaigns against Hezbollah and Hamas. And Netanyahu has the strength and support in his cabinet and made it likely he can survive in power for another year. We'll see if that pans out. But like Netanyahu, he's been around forever. He's been a senior politician in that space since before I was born. He's like the Houdini of politicians. Like he gets out of everything. So, and of course that wouldn't be possible without the U.S. So, and of course the Israeli Defense Force has been saying for some time that military objectives in Gaza have been met. I mean, they objectively haven't, but they're saying that they are preparing this ceasefire deal with Hezbollah as again, gift to Trump when he takes office in January, again, so they can continue to cleanse West Bank and stuff like that. So now, is this ceasefire deal, which would bring stability to the region, actually plausible? Well, again, sorry guys, I'm exposing you to my process, which is to watch adversarial or oppositional media, because you get a lot of good information. It's just the basic premise of open source intelligence collection. So watching media.
And joining us now with more on the potential ceasefire and ongoing war in the north.
This is from an hour ago.
Is Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve Sarit Zehavi, founder and president of ALMA, specializing in Israel's security challenges on its northern border. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. Thank you.
So we still don't have all the details about the ceasefire agreement, but from what is taking shape, I mean, what do you make of this agreement? Does it truly address Israel's security concerns?
First and foremost, I want to say that we don't know exactly what's in this agreement. These are all different kind of reports that...
Also, it's not Hezbollah saying it, it's the Lebanese government saying it.
It's not happening till it's happening. But by what is being published, I think that too much attention is being given to Resolution 1701. And what we have learned from the past 18 years is that the two key players that were supposed to enforce the resolution, which is the Lebanese army and UNIFIL, actually did nothing around that. And this is something that must be solved.
Mm. And is now the right time for a ceasefire agreement, do you think?
Yes, in this respect, I do believe that both sides are interested in a ceasefire. I think, and I'm saying that from the most personal.
Okay, so we've talked about Israeli interest in having a ceasefire, but you also have to hold in balance that there are a lot of people in Lebanon that are pissed at Hezbollah and different groups that hold them responsible for all the bloodshed that's happened. This is a generalizing statement, but they definitely do exist. There's political pressure on Hezbollah to end this. They are a governmental entity deeply embedded into civic life in southern Lebanon. And yeah, they obviously they have had a reputation amongst a lot of people for good governance, and they want to maintain that reputation. So they have a vested interest in a ceasefire as well. I know a lot of people are asking, if there's not a ceasefire in Gaza, like how could Hezbollah, because that was one of the things they said there wouldn't be a ceasefire until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. Well, the situation on the ground has changed. They're still fighting and retreating Israeli forces. But again, the situation in Lebanon is deteriorating. No one said the Da'iya doctrine, the collective punishment of civilians, didn't work. Objectively, Israel was the one who invaded. They didn't accomplish any of their objectives. Well, we'll see what the ceasefire, if a ceasefire even happens. This is all completely hypothetical and by no means actually going to happen. We're supposed to hear a decision tomorrow or in the next 36 hours. But again, we'll see. Israel will do what it did last time. The IDF got its butt kicked. It couldn't penetrate in or hold ground, and they'll just claim victory. And so that's one of the risks of Hezbollah accepting the ceasefire, because they will be painted by Western media as having lost because they had to be beaten to accept a ceasefire. So it's a really complicated situation. It's really hard to speak on, will the ceasefire be actually effectuated. Well, we've seen this before where they sorry, I got distracted by one of y'all's comments. We've seen this before where they build up the potential of a ceasefire and then say, no, Hamas didn't agree. You know, they're terrorists. What are you going to do? So this could be part of this.
Point of view as a resident of the North, I think we do want to go back to normality. I think that the IDF gained great achievements, military achievements against Hezbollah, degrading its capabilities on various fields, including killing the leadership of Hezbollah, killing more than 170 commanders of Hezbollah.
Okay, so we talked about with Major General Dennis Leitch last Friday, where, you know, killing commanders doesn't destroy the entire command infrastructure, because it's just like a change of command. Every 12 months, a commander changes in the U.S. military. Like, their obsession with killing commanders, and there's always someone young and hungry and competent to replace them, just like any other professional military. So this obsession with killing commanders didn't work in Iraq, didn't work in Afghanistan, and it's not going to work here.
Eliminating big amounts of its rockets and pushing it away from the border. Yet, I think the main concern of the people here is the question whether Hezbollah will be capable of recovering. And that this is the key to any ceasefire, to make sure that Hezbollah is not recovering the capabilities after a while, and that there is somebody there to enforce it, whether it's Israel or anybody else. I know that we insist that it will be Israel, but there is a risk in this as well. If it will be Israel, the question is how long the ceasefire will last, and what does that mean for our daily lives here in the North?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you mentioned what happens the day after the ceasefire. You mentioned the Lebanese army. You mentioned UNIFIL. I mean, how can Israel truly trust the Lebanese army, the international community, in controlling Hezbollah when it has utterly failed to do so for the past 20 years?
This is interesting, and it gives a peek into this isolationist mentality that's interesting because it didn't necessarily exist before. People inside Israel, these war hawks inside Israel, do feel isolated from the international community, including Western countries, in a way that they haven't felt before. And that's all part of the long path to pariah statehood.
There is only one way to build this trust, and this is if Lebanon will completely change its relationship with Hezbollah. Because what is happening today is that Lebanon is playing a double game, and we are negotiating with Nabih Berri while it is clear that Hezbollah is involved. There is no difference between Lebanese government and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is a member of the Lebanese government officially, not below the surface. The minister of the government of Lebanon that is responsible for all these smugglings of Hezbollah, for the entrances and exits of the state of Lebanon, whether it's Hariri airport or the ground border crossings with Syria, is a Hezbollah member. So I think the third thing that should happen, and this is where the international community should be very much involved, is a change of relationship between the state of Lebanon and Hezbollah, designating it as a terrorist organization, and completely changing the situation within Lebanon itself, according to Resolution 1559, that demands the disarmament of all militias in Lebanon.
Okay, well, okay. I know some of y'all are Lebanese or watching from Lebanon. That the level of being out of touch with the lived reality of people that are your enemy is crazy. The Lebanese government declaring Hezbollah a terrorist organization and demanding that all militias in Lebanon disarm. What? Like, why would you even say that? That's like the most embarrassing thing I've heard someone say on TV, because it's just not going to happen. Wow. Okay. So just, yeah. And she also just equated Hezbollah accidentally with, or on purpose, with the Lebanese military. So, yeah. So look, this is why we're just kind of like, keep talking about a ceasefire deal. Axios is reporting that it's about to happen. But then again, you have major policy advisors like her, like getting on national news stations and saying this absurd stuff. Yeah, dude, the Lebanese government and people are going to declare Hezbollah a terrorist organization. You saw what happened in Beirut when that Australian reporter for Sky News referred to them as a terrorist organization, and they're just like, no, they're freedom fighters. Like, how are you in our country? You don't even know like anything about it. So, yeah, and someone said, tell a lie enough times it becomes Israel. Yeah, that's been floating around for a while. But look, in the end, Trump is the anti-doing something person. Like, something needs to be done, but he's not going to do it. He's appointing Mike Huckabee, a rabid Christian evangelical Zionist who doesn't believe Palestinians exist, as the ambassador to Israel. So, again, as we said in the beginning, as long as the annexation and the occupation exists, this violence is going to continue. And that means we don't have enough time to bring Iran into it, but Iran is also much closer to going nuclear. North Korea has an increasing security relationship with Russia. So does Iran. China's Xi Jinping has become like more hardline about certain issues, and like Trump is in like the worst global security position he can be in, and he's electing some of the worst people, and he's not anti-war. So if you, again, I keep saying, if you love 2024, you're going to love 2025. The only silver lining in all this is that the United States doesn't have the capacity to wage a world war, but neither does Europe. So hopefully it won't happen just because of that. Doesn't mean we can't go nuclear though, right? So this is why I say guillotines 2028. That's who y'all should be voting for. Okay. So first of all, Q&A. Let's do it. We haven't done it all last week because things have been crazy. USA is a fossil, totally irrelevant to new order, to the new world order. Okay. Well, I don't think it can be rescued. I think it's in a terminal decline, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a power for a long time. Excuse me, allergies. A lot of people make this clunky comparison between the Roman Empire and the United States. I don't like it. I think it's reductive and intellectually lazy. But the Roman Empire had a lot of inertia behind it, and it took a long time to fall. It was in terminal decline for a long time. But everything, the free flow of information and globalization, everything happens so much faster now. So, hope springs eternal. I think the decline of the American empire is a certainty, which I'm looking forward to because it'll make everyone's lives, both abroad and in America, so much better. But will we survive as a polity? Doesn't look too promising. Don't you think that the U.S. would prefer to kick the table, nuclear war, rather than be the unchallenged world ruler? I don't trust the U.S., man. I don't trust the U.S. either. But like all of these policymakers, all these billionaires, like who are maybe pushing for something, all these imperialists, where do they live? They live in primary nuclear target zones. They live in LA. They live in Chicago. They live in New York City. They live in Atlanta. They live in Washington, D.C. They live in Seattle. Like, okay, they're making a bunker, but like, what is having nuclear? What is having all this money if money no longer exists? So that's the principal deterrent of what we call mutually assured destruction. I don't think they're that insane. Because it's hard to maximize shareholder profits, which is their fiduciary responsibility to do so when the global economic system's completely collapsed. We have to hope before like things change that capitalists and capitalism will defend themselves, and there's no way once nukes start getting launched to stop nukes from hitting United States soil and killing a lot of these people who craft U.S. foreign policy. So self-preservation, hopefully. Self-preservation of them and their money. Don't focus too much on Lindsey Graham. It will give you night terrors. There are many horrible stories about him, which we will absolutely not get into. So watching this is so much more palatable than knowing that Israel has lost 40 plus Merkava tanks in the last month. Those are the figures that we are going off of because they seem very realistic. That's why no tanks have penetrated into southern Lebanon. Plus, the ground is horrible for it. So, yeah, I just think given that they've lost so many tanks and stuff, it's a lot. So many people not accomplished any of their objectives. It's amazing that they're still so detached from reality. That they don't think Hezbollah is going to repair itself. That they think the Lebanese government even has the possibility of declaring it a terrorist organization. What? That all militias in Lebanon are going to disarm? It's so crazy and so detached from realpolitik that I'm just like I can't take you guys seriously anymore. Lebanese watching from Ohio. Hey yo, thanks for swinging by. All right, so what indicators would you look for before saying U.S. is done, time to leave? I mean, already done. Okay, one second. Don't do that. Don't do that, Pat. If you know, and you don't want to know, it has to do with Lindsey Graham. All right. What indicators would you look for before saying the U.S. is done from time to time? It's a horrifying story. Well, I mean, I think we're already done. We have a massive recruiting crisis. The economic conditions are only going to continue to deteriorate. More wealth is going to be funneled out of the public sector into the private sector. There's going to be the complete disintegration of the middle class. And, it's going to go where everyone's worst nightmare goes, where Aristotle's worst nightmare goes, where you have an entire ruling class and everybody else is in debt bondage and wage slavery. And then maybe, there'll be a popular uprising or a peaceful revolution beforehand. But I don't really have much hope in the American people and their capacity for activism and for organization and for uniting amongst themselves in a class conscious struggle. So, yeah, if you want to leave and you don't want to be a part of it, getting out now while our economy and the dollar is still strong would be a good way to be an expat. I'm staying here though. Okay, I'm not leaving. Just because I'm stubborn, and I enjoy conflict. So maybe the Israelis can. Okay. Here we go. Oh, what's up, Bullet the Bunny? What threats to BRICS might the U.S. NATO states might we see in the coming few years? Well, I mean, most of their main mechanisms are what? Sanctions, because those have been working so well with Russia and Iran and Venezuela. Like what tools do we have? The tools that we would have used to isolate China, sanctions aren't going to work. One of the reasons that BRICS is uniting so quickly is because they watch what happened with the Russian war in Ukraine, what's happening with Venezuela, what happened with Iran. And they're like, you know what? They have a significant portion of the earth under sanctions. So we have our differences. We have our inherent contradictions. There's some infighting, serious infighting. You got India and China trying to work together. But in the end, resisting the unipolar power and the main trick of U.S. power projection, the economic aspect, is what they're working to prevent. So threats would be invasion, which, again, we don't have the industrial base to do at the moment or the recruiting base to do at the moment. There's just not enough soldiers. There's not the political will amongst the American people for another foreign war where many, 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 many Americans would die and there's no exit strategy. So and our sanctions don't work. They haven't worked for a long time. So what are we going to do? Really? I guess send a bunch of nukes, but then again, we'll all just die. So I don't see a way out of this hole. I already left. I'm in Colombia. Good for you. I'm going to have to stay to make sure the kids are out. Yep. Oh yeah, girl, I'm going down with the ship. We made this bed. Let's sleep in it. Yeah, I think I'm going down with the ship too. I'm going to take some vacations over. overseas, but I'm going to be based out of here no matter how bad it gets. All right, y'all. Let me see. One last thing. Trump increasing use of troops domestically. Would this increase recruitment? A lot of people who sign up for the military, especially combat arms, don't do it to fight Americans. That's not their like boyhood, adolescent vision of glory and dying on a battlefield. There's certain amount of soldiers that would love to be part of deportation actions and, killing protesters and stuff. But no, it will not help with recruitment. And since the United States doesn't have the same kind of military power projection overseas that it had decades ago, what's the military going to do? It's going to turn inward. It's going to turn inward under Trump, and it would turn inward under Democrats. So look for it to turn inward, y'all. Don't you hate how all these things are connected? So yeah, I think we just need to do a roundtable before Thanksgiving. If you're living in the United States and you celebrate that whitewashing genocidal holiday, I mean, look, I'm not a big fan. There's certain family members I don't want to have to interact with. I get it. Going to try to keep it apolitical and just like check the familial obligation box. But just want to do a roundtable before of all these flashpoints before everyone goes on holiday here in the States. So thanks for sticking around. Again, bottom line, yeah, pay your rent in December. Maybe not January, and then just start squatting. I don't know. Look, don't look at me for financial advice. Okay, all right. There's a reason why I only have one bookshelf because that another one's too expensive on Wayfair. So, anyways, y'all, hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to be back. We might do one more episode this week. If not, Monday, 100%. But you can keep checking Mint Press News social media account and mine for the next episode time. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.